Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68. I'm Christian Sykes, your host, joined as always by Charles Branch and Michael Harper. Again, much like the Alabama basketball team, we are down a member. Um, Fortunately, it's not two like Alabama was on last Saturday, but Joey, I think, is in Disney, so we'll give him a pass on that one. But um, we're here just going to recap the Tennessee game, recap the Missouri game, and then preview the big matchup on Sunday versus Florida or at Florida. And this one should be pretty quick and easy. But how you guys doing today?
I guess warm right now inside. We'll see this Saturday, this weekend, as it drops below 20 degrees. I know, Christian, you're probably laughing at us. Michael probably got a little bit of it up in the Huntsville area, but of course in Birmingham we shut everything down on Monday because the weather dropped below 32 degrees, and that was it. So,
Oh yeah, we were stuck inside. We did get some ice though, and all the roads were shut down. But overall, it wasn't too bad. We're just freezing up here now.
Yeah, it's let me see what it's currently 29 degrees. We're expecting to get between 3 and 6 inches worth of snow on Saturday, which is a lot, I've been told. A above average amount, if you will. But yeah, it's supposed to get down to like 10 degrees on Sunday here, so I'm not looking forward to that. But I am looking forward to potentially making snowmen on Saturday. Unfortunately, we play on Sunday, so it's not like I'm gonna be missing any of the basketball game on Saturday by being out in the snow. But yeah, I think we got close to like an inch or a half inch of ice, which was kind of rough. But um, well, much like the weather in our areas, Alabama was pretty ice cold on Saturday against Tennessee, scoring only 73 points. It's their third home loss, I believe, of the season, which is the most under Nate Oates outside of his, I believe, his first season. Um, and I mean, I think just from my perspective, I did watch the game on Saturday, and I did watch the midweek game versus Missouri. So if you want to blame anybody, blame me. I was watching the Tennessee game, but in all seriousness, I think that that Tennessee game really comes down to the fact that you don't have Amari Allen and you don't have Aiden Holloway on your team, both dealing with injuries, much like what Alabama has been dealing with all season. You really hope to get those guys back. Despite not having those guys, I really do feel like that game was winnable for Alabama if you could have just gotten some type of offense going. And fortunately, Alabama doesn't, and Alabama loses their fifth straight to Tennessee. Um, and hopefully, coming this Sunday, Alabama can right the ship against teams that they just have a losing record against under Nate Oates. So there's not really much takeaways outside of the fact that Alabama just couldn't get an offense going, and Tennessee just scored more points. And I mean, it really comes down to that. But what were your guys' thoughts on the game on Saturday?
go ahead, Michael.
So, obviously, the all of the attention was on Charles Bediako, and rightfully so. And for honestly, I was pretty impressed with his play. Um, it It was offensively, it was something that we really have not seen. There were a couple moves that he's made that he did not have in his bag when he was when he was with us before in 2022 and 2023. There was one instance where he had the ball. He was just being a pressure release and caught the ball just above the baseline, had his back to the basket, and he made a drop step and got to the rim and finished for an and one opportunity. And that's something that he couldn't do a couple of years ago. And even we'll talk in the Missouri game, or when we talk about the Missouri game, he had his back to the basket on a what was an unintentional post up. And you could see him starting to make a post move there, which is again something that he has not had in the past in his bag. And so I was impressed with his play. We knew he would make an effect on the defensive end. We kind of knew that, and that's what we were excited about, bringing him back. We knew he would kind of anchor that defensive side of the ball, give us some more much needed rim protection, and more rebounding. However, I know that his rebounding numbers Saturday weren't what we thought they would be. He even said that he had to do a better job rebounding. Some of his lack of rebounding was, he was contesting shots a lot. And so when you contest, you're not necessarily always in rebounding position. So I think some of it had to do with that, but he even admitted that he had to do a better job rebounding. And we saw the next game. I mean, he had 3 rebounds right, within the first 4 minutes of the game. So I know he took up the story. He was most of the storyline, and rightfully so, because it was it was welcoming seeing him back. I do think Tennessee adjusted very quickly. They adjusted at half and started to really run us off the 3-point line. And as you've seen under Nate Oates' offenses, it's not so much how many threes we hit. A lot of times it's how many can we get up. If you look at some of the losses just under Oates, which coaches have tried to do, is Rick Pitino is kind of one of the ones that started the whole deal, where he's just like, we're going to try to limit Alabama to under 23s. And so Tennessee ran us off the line, and it really hurt. Not to use this as an excuse, and it's not really an excuse, it's just a reality. You didn't have not just 2 of your better players, you didn't have 2 guys that can create. And Amari Allen can create their own shot. Aiden Holloway can create their own shot. They're also both high percentage 3-point shooters. So not having those 2, it's a complete difference in the game, in my opinion. But like Christian said, it was still a winnable game. Got to figure out ways to win games like that when you are without 2 of your better players, because what happens if those 2 players get in foul trouble, right? Or those 2 guys are just not on. That's something that I think even Nate Oates said he's got to do a better job figuring out ways to do better in these games. So just with the Tennessee game, I know I've rambled a little bit about that, but again, it's something that I think can be, looked at as, it was a winnable game against a very good team without 2 of Alabama's best players.
It's probably the first game all season that the injuries actually impacted the offense. We've talked a few times about how the injuries may be impacting the defense because guys aren't comfortable with rotations or just don't have the communication that they need on the defensive side that you would get in a practice and just being able to play a lot of minutes together. I'm looking at the minutes breakdown for Saturday. The only guard you really bring off the bench is Jalil Bethea, and he's having some challenges, I feel like, as far as buying into the program or buying into the right stuff right now. You got London Jemison, who played 8 minutes, had 4 fouls. So when you have somebody like him who got in foul trouble so quickly, and then you don't have Amari Allen, I think both of those guys would have been used against Ament. Of course, Jemison was, but then if you got Allen out there as well, you distribute those fouls a little bit more evenly, or just have another body that you could throw against Ament as well. And then you got Noah Williamson, who played 7 minutes, and Charles Bediako, who played 25. You basically played 6 guys on Saturday against Tennessee. And talking about Holloway and Allen, who finished the game with 9 assists, they're 2 guys to combine that average 7 assists. So you got 7 assists sitting on the bench. And being in the game, you just could tell, not intentionally, we were just playing a lot slower. Philon had to control the ball a lot more. You didn't have as many guys with Holloway and Allen being available to get to the rim to where you then could spray it out and get good looks from three. Going into the game, I think we would have said our guards were the advantage, and then you have two of them that aren't available. And you get 26 3-point attempts up. I think Tennessee got 18 up, but you both hit the same amount. You both hit six threes. And, for an Alabama team, when you're going against the likes of a Tennessee or teams like that, you would expect that there to be, +4, +5, and 3-point makes. Some positives is you won the turnover battle. You were winning the rebounding battle going into halftime, I believe. You do get out rebounded by 9. And when you look at where Tennessee got their points from, it was two guys in Ament and Gillespie. They got 30 points in the paint. Alabama actually outscored them in the paint, 38-30. They got 17 at the free throw line, and they got six threes, which means they got 14 points. They had seven made shots from the mid-range area, which it would be a little bit of Tennessee basketball. Rick Barnes is not the same style as far as what we do, as far as shots at the rim, free throws, and three-pointers. But still, I feel like 14 points from the mid-range is the most I've seen from a team in a really, really long time when just trying to see how teams are scoring their points against us. It's a game that you walk away, and I agree it's a game that we could have won, but it just felt incomplete because you have guys on the bench that if they were healthy, if they were available, think the game's completely different. And we'll have an opportunity to find that out at the end of February when we go up to Knoxville. Hopefully, Aiden Holloway's available. Hopefully, Amari Allen's available. I walked away feeling very confident that we can hold our own and possibly get a win up in Knoxville when we play them again. Uh, but as you'll hear from us, I think as you'll hear from a lot of people across the country, like it's just about getting healthy with this Alabama team. And I don't know if we'll ever get healthy the way we want to. The team 2 years ago did get healthy, unfortunately bowed out of the SEC tournament after losing to Florida in one game. But that's a stretch potentially where, could get healthy as you go into the NCAA tournament. And with adding Bediako and guys continuing to improve, that's what you're pinning a lot of hopes on, I think, as Alabama fans is, just trying to get healthy because I do think there's a lot of opportunities for this team to do damage once we get into March.
Yeah, I think it's so hard because I think you've only had two guys this season, Noah Williamson and Houston Millette, surprisingly enough, are the only two guys that have played every single game this season. That's it. Every other player on the team has had at least one game that they've missed. And for Alabama, it's I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, you're just using injuries as an excuse," but like truthfully, if Alabama could just find a stretch of games, like 4 or 5 games, where they're just healthy, they're able to play everybody they want to, get what they want. Like I really feel like this Alabama team is a team that is a severely underrated team in the landscape of college basketball, just because you haven't seen the team be healthy so far. And then on top of that, you're adding Charles Bediako, which a lot of people were talking about and asking me about how do you think his impact's going to be for the team? What do you think, how is he going to be? Is he going to be, Charles Bediako of 3 years ago, or is he going to be, like James Najee at Baylor, who hasn't done particularly well for Baylor? A lot of people were asking me that before we watched him play, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to give you an answer on what my thoughts on Charles Bediako are until I see Charles Bediako, right?" And after watching him and as we get into the Missouri game, we'll talk about that as well. But like specifically in the Missouri game, with how he was able to, or how he allowed Aiden Sherrill to kind of play more of that four position, and you saw the immediate impact where Aiden comes out, and I think he had like what was it, like 6 or 8 of the first like 10 points for the team, and was really dynamic offensively. And I think I said this in our group chat or something. I was like, man, I'm really surprised at how well those two worked together. Um, and obviously we're gonna always take this, but if you can get Charles Bediako to give you double-digit points every single game, like that's huge for this team. And um, so for me, I'm hopeful that the injunction hearing on Friday, which of course it's a day before the Auburn game, like wouldn't have it any other way. Um, Hopefully it goes in our favor. If it doesn't, then we're kind of back to square one with that with where we're at. But um, it having Chuck in the lineup, I think, raises our ceiling tremendously. And you've already seen the impact defensively. Alabama is now in the top 60 in KenPom defensive efficiency after hovering around 70 for the last month or so. So it's an immediate impact. And I think even in the Tennessee game, like Alabama defended Tennessee pretty well. I mean, you held them to under 30% shooting. You held them 79 points. Um, and so like you can't complain too much about holding a team to 79 points. You just need to get some offense going. But um I'm excited, and I like you said, Charles, I came away with that Tennessee game. Not disappointed that we lost just because it was another loss under our belt, but not terribly upset with the performance, knowing, that you had what was it, 28 points, 29 points sitting on the bench, not being able to go. So it's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, it wasn't the Texas loss.
Yeah.
Of our three conference losses, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and Texas, two of them, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, come away feeling that they were winnable games. You had opportunities to win the game, but you're looking at key players being on the bench for the majority of those games or just outright not being available. Texas is a game that, shouldn't have gotten away from you, but looking, going through some KenPom numbers today as well, didn't realize how good of an offensive team Texas is. And that is when you look at our losses this year, they've been to top 20 KenPom teams on the offensive side, except for Tennessee. Tennessee's, I know, in the 40 range, but they pair that with a really, really strong defense. So, as you were just mentioning, we are seeing improvement on our defensive numbers with guys being out, even into the addition of Charles Bediako. So that is obviously huge. And I do Charles Bediako is the story for a lot of people as far as his return and all that, and it's going to continue to be the story. I don't want, as Alabama fans, also to miss the story of how good Aiden Sherrill is playing right now. It started a little bit slow this year, but I felt like he was a guy we talked about last year. Every time he touched the floor, really impressed with Aiden Sherrill, really impressed with Aiden Sherrill. And he has hit a stretch where he has played really, really good basketball for us. And he's another guy that I think is continuing to battle some injuries or just battle cramping, whatever you want to call it. He's a guy who is playing through stuff. I know for sure he's playing through stuff in the game against Texas. But I'm continued to be impressed with his growth this season. And what will be fun is if the ruling does go Alabama's way and Bediako's cleared to play the rest of the year, you get to see that versatility of Aiden Sherrill, of what we did see against Missouri, him playing more of the four, which I expect us to see more against this game against Florida, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But now you can play him at the four, play him at the five, maybe play Taylor Bowen at the three. It really gives this Alabama team a lot of options, and I don't think you're taking away a lot from Alabama. Whereas last year, when you would get really big with Cliff and Grant and Jaron Stevenson, guys just didn't shoot the three as well as you would have liked within that lineup. Stevenson obviously started very, very cold for the year, and Grant Nelson has not always been a high percentage three-point shooter. Charles Bediako is not going to step out and shoot a lot of threes, but I think Sherrill shoots at a pretty good clip. He's definitely a threat enough where somebody's got to get up on him. Taylor Bowen's not hitting 40% as we talked about before we got on, but it's a higher volume. And you can still pair those two guys with all the guards. So the versatility that Bediako is bringing to this lineup with where you can play Sherrill is obviously going to give teams a lot more challenges should this go our way Friday, I think February 6th.
So one thing I was surprised, like Christian said a minute ago, I was surprised with how well Aiden Sherrill and Charles Bediako played together. I was I said before, and I'll admit that I was wrong, but I said that I thought we would rarely see Sherelle and Bediako play together. Except I did say with the exception of the Florida game. I said you would see that a lot. And my concern was foul trouble, and not just stretching the floor, because I know that Aiden Sherelle can shoot the ball and he can stretch the floor. But we've typically had one of the things that has made our offense work is when we have four guys that can not just create, but that can attack the rim. And I know Taylor Bobowen's not really a very good ball handler. We see that, but he's good enough to where you can attack a closeout. So if somebody's closing out really hard to try to block your shot, he can pump fake, and he's good enough to put it on the floor and go to the rim. That's not that. I didn't really think that was a strength of Aiden Sherelle. And it's still not necessarily a strength of his, but it's something that we saw that he can make somebody pay and do once, and that's really all it takes. And I was also concerned. My other concern is that we had seen before we got Charles Bediako back, we had seen Aiden Sherelle put up 22 and 26 back to back. So he was becoming very effective around the rim. And I didn't necessarily want us to lose that production around the rim. So my expectation was always Charles Bediako would come off the bench, and you would have maybe 3 minutes a game, maybe a 4-minute stretch in between TV timeouts where you would get both of them together. But it worked perfectly this week with Missouri playing two bigs. We're going to see it Sunday. And I bet we see it a little more now that the next time we play Tennessee, now that, the more and more that Aiden Sherelle, Charles Bediako get used to playing together. And really that creates, I know we haven't run as much half court offense this year as we did last year, but there's some potential to run some stuff that Nate Oates has run in the past when you have both of those in the game together.
Yeah, and you also talk about like just the ability. So a lot of the times, what's ended up happening is you'll have one guy on the floor, and what we saw later, before Bediako came back, is you have Amari Allen at the 4, and Amari Allen's ability to set a screen, right, and kind of start the offense, which we're a very heavy pick and roll type of team, or not necessarily pick and roll type of team, but just a screen team. That's how we're setting up a lot of the offense. And with the ability of Chuck being able to do that, and if you watch how Chuck sets his screens, he does it in a very professional manner to the point where I'm surprised he hasn't been called for an illegal screen at this point. I saw a few times in Missouri where I was like, man, Chuck's really getting that arm out there and making sure that like he's not, that the guy's not able to get around him. But I mean, they're not calling it, so it's whatever. But having both Aiden and Chuck being able to kind of set the screen to generate the offense kind of makes it a little bit more dynamic, especially when you go to the pick and pop route with Aiden. And then on top of that, if it's something that, if Charles Bediako does get cleared and plays the rest of the season, you could be looking at a lineup potentially where you have LeBaron, you have Aiden Holloway or Latrell Wrightsell if you wanted Latrell for a little bit more size. You have Amari Allen at the 3, you have Aiden Sherelle at the 4, and you have Chuck at the 5. And you talk a lot about how similar, in getting into the Florida game, how similar styles of offense or styles of offensive system between Florida and Alabama. Well, the difference between them is typically Florida's running it with a lot bigger lineup. And if you're able to go in and put Amari Allen at the 3, Aiden Sherelle at the 4, Bediako at the 5, then that looks more like a Florida style or a Florida type of lineup than what we've typically seen
Right.
under Alabama. And we've seen that that's been a recipe for success for Florida, so it might be a recipe for success for Alabama.
Well, and if you look, not to just go straight into the Florida
Yeah.
game, but if you look at the games last year against Florida, if you look at the SEC tournament, the game of the SEC tournament, it was a back and forth game, and we were actually leading until Grant Nelson went out, and so we lost one of those bigs, and we lost a guy that could actually match up at the 4 spot with Florida when they're playing, Chinyalu and Condon in at the same time. And so now, and to be quite honest, before Charles Bediako came back, I was actually dreading this game because you were going to have Taylor Balboa or Amari Allen and London Jemison match up with either Condon or Chinyalu. And that's not something that I was really looking forward to. I think Allen could have held his own as from a rebounding standpoint, but just there would have been too many mismatches that Golden would have exploited, I think, in the post. Now, you're going to be able to match, go toe to toe with back to the basket defense with. And you actually will have a secondary rim protector, if you have, and I'll save all this because I know we got to talk about the Missouri game, and I'll come back to it. So we can come back to this soon and go to the Missouri game.
I mean, there's not really much to say about the Missouri game outside of Charles Bediako, I think, got 14 and 6, and then Latrell Wrightsell, I think, was the story of the game, going 7 of 10, which surprisingly, I didn't realize that was the first time he hit 7 3-pointers in a game. Also, second surprise of the night is I think there's been 9 players under Nate Oates that has hit 7 3-pointers. Every one of them made sense to me. Mark Sears, Jaden Shackelford, Keon Ellis, now Latrell, Brandon Miller. There was
John Petty.
Miller. John Petty is another one. The one that was surprising to me was James Beetle Bolden hit 7 3-pointers in the blowout loss. I think it was to Vanderbilt when Saban Lee had 40 points against us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember that game. That's Petty had gotten his arm tweaked against Mississippi State, I think the game before that. And so we were down yet another guard. The injuries that we've experienced with this team this year, it does remind me of Oates' first team because I remember playing Arkansas and I think we had 7 healthy bodies for that game and almost won that game first time against Eric Musselman. I remember they also put Galen Smith in a washing machine. He moving back and forth and couldn't guard anybody.
And for the record, just for the record, in Oates' first year, Henry Barea was not the strength and conditioning coach.
No.
Because that's important for some.
Yes, for some people, but one of the things with the Missouri game too that I was impressed with as I was talking about some of the sets that we're able to run with Aiden Sherrill and Charles Bediako in the game is the staggered screen or the double screen that we set, the double ball screen that we set. Sherrill set the ball screen first and popped, and then Bediako set the next ball screen and rolled. And I believe, did Aiden Sherrill hit the 3 on a pop or did we get a dunk? I can't remember. I just remember we got something out of that. But it's a great set because it's almost impossible to set to hedge. And so you're also going to have if you do hedge, you're leaving somebody wide open because you can't tag. And so it's just, you can't really run those as effective with Taylor Balboa at the 4 or even with Amari Allen at the 4, just because Sherrill is such a wide body. And then Bediako now is such a physical presence that it opens so much more now that, and again, like I said, I'll admit that I was wrong because I was pretty adamant about that they would not play together often. And they have kind of proved me wrong. And I'm okay with it because it means we've had success.
Absolutely. Um,
I have to say I was very surprised, not in the fact that we won, but in the way and the margin that we won. Because coming in, I thought Missouri was a pretty good team. They beat Florida at home. They beat Kentucky on the road. They beat Auburn pretty good at home. What I'm realizing is Missouri's a good team in Como. Everywhere else, they have kind of gotten the doors blown off of them. And it didn't help that they went 8 of 23 from the free throw line. I know they made a lot of people happy getting gooey fries in the second half, but I did expect them to make it more of a contest, more of a game going in, and especially with kind of how we were coming to the game. I wouldn't say necessarily say that we were reeling, but obviously a lot of things unsure about is who's going to be available that night. So I think looking back on it, I do think Missouri is going to continue to be a team that will dominate at home. Maybe they'll find a couple more road wins. Still expect them to be in the NCAA tournament. And is this the premier win of Alabama's schedule? Whether non-con, I mean, whether schedule overall or SEC schedule, no. But I still think this is a very good win on Tuesday night.
Well, anytime you get a win that margin of victory against a team that's not one of the worst teams in the league, like I mean, obviously we would if we do this to LSU later in the season, we'll kind of say okay, whatever. But to win the game like that, and what was the most impressive part to me is that we didn't relax when we got up. We've seen this team have a tendency to look bored at times, and I think some of that is due to the schedule that we played early on. Every game seemed to be a marquee matchup. So then, we would have a tendency to look bored against Kennesaw State or against, North Dakota or somebody like that we would look like we're playing with our food, so to speak. And we did not look like that Tuesday night. And so that was the most impressive thing to me from an overall standpoint. I also think we have to point out Houston Millette. I know he didn't score a lot of points, but just from a leadership standpoint, I know Nate Oates made sure to point out that Millette was just as happy and probably maybe more happy for Latrell Wrightsell than Latrell Wrightsell actually was with his shooting performance. The other thing I want to point out, and this is the exact reason why Millette logs as many minutes as he does. Alabama was up by 20, 24 or 26 with less than a minute left in the game. Houston Millette was in. A ball was falling out of bounds, and he dove on the ball trying to save it out of bounds. Honestly, didn't have much of a shot at it, and still did it. And those are the reasons why he's playing, because nobody probably would have said a word to him, but he did it anyway. And that's the culture that Nate Oates really wants to create. And that's the reason why he plays so many minutes. I don't know. Maybe he knew how many blue collar points he had and he was trying to win the hard hat, but that's why you do it.
yeah, I think he also had 10 rebounds, right? And yet again, it was another game where he gets a ball out of bounds, calls a timeout. I think we were making jokes. I'm pretty sure he's called more timeouts this year, like actual timeouts, than Nate Oates has. Um, and it's very interesting to see because there's been a lot of discourse about Jaleel Bethia in his minutes and or lack thereof. Um, and it's interesting to see like Houston getting so many minutes, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, he shouldn't be playing because I think he went like 1 of 7 from the field or something like that." But he also was the team's leading rebounder with 10 rebounds, and he does a lot of the little things, and he's a guy that is happy for his teammates more so than what his own success. And um, Nate was talking about how they didn't play Jaleel because of, defensive issues and things of that nature. And it goes to show you that like you need to figure for players that want to play, you need to figure out how to impact winning without just shooting, right? Like you can go 1 of 7 and still impact the game and have one of the larger impacts in the game despite shooting poorly. And I think that that's something that some of the younger players would try to figure out. I think London Jimison does a really good job. He hit quite a few big threes. I think he's a guy. I'm hoping that you know Alabama's had a tendency to have bring in freshmen and then they transfer after a year or they go to the draft. Like Alabama does rarely has guys stay longer than a year or two. Hopefully, he's a guy that comes and stays and continues to play. But I think that's probably why would Jaleel's probably not playing as much. Is just because an effort thing, doing the blue collar things properly, and then also like defensive assignments. And I don't fault Jaleel for that because he's a guy that, in high school was a top 3 projected lot like pick in the NBA draft. I guarantee you he probably didn't feel like he needed to play that much defense or, do the little things right because he was just so much talented than everybody else. But that's why you come to Alabama is kind of learn these lessons. So um,
And
other than
and
that, so go ahead. Go
oh,
ahead.
and sorry. And I was gonna say if he does like here's the thing is if Jaleel will continue, if he will just buy in to what Oates is trying to do, then I think he'll be successful and he will be a better player for it. He may not want to come back. I don't know. I don't really like to speculate too much on who's going to transfer out because you just don't know. It's just too unpredictable. But he will be a better player if he'll buy in, if he'll buy into what Alabama's doing on defense. He's kind of bought in, I think, to the offense. I still think there's things he's trying to figure out. I still think he's trying to figure out when he should shoot it, when he should attack the rim, what gaps he's trying to attack. And that a lot of that goes to him missing so much in preseason practice. But if he will continue to do that, I could see him flourishing in year 2 if he decides to stay. But if he could, at the same time, he could see a lot more minutes if he would do what Houston Millette does, and it's not just about diving on basketballs, right? Because we've seen him do that. It's about learning the scouting report, which he may be doing. I'm not there to say that, but it's about not getting lost on defense, and it's about having defensive production, right? And so he has to pick up that defensive production, just to if he wants to get those minutes to pick up.
He's a guy who, when you watch him on the floor or just, look at him in general, you feel like the defensive tools are there. I agree. It's a buy-in. Do you want to do this? I don't think it's an ability like we've talked about having rosters or having guys that defense is just not their thing. They're out there trying to play defense, but they're just not going to be good defensive players. I look at Jalil Bethia and what he brings on the offensive side as far as his quickness, his athleticism, his length. And you feel like if you can just bring that to the defensive side, you can be a defensive stopper, especially a defensive stopper in that kind of small forward guard range where Amari Allen has stepped up and played good defense. I think a lot of guys are stepping up and playing good defense. Philon, when he came in, everybody talked about how good of a defense he plays. So you got Philon at point guard. You got guys in Terrell and Bediako down low. It's still, I wouldn't say we're looking for somebody. I think guys can do it, but you're not, there are not many Herb Joneses out there. I totally get that, totally understand it, and it's not fair to compare to Herb Jones. I'll use like Noah Clowney as another example. I still don't know if there's a guy on this team that you just look at and like that's our defensive stopper. That's Jawan Gary's that guy who's just going to go in, he's going to play hard, he's going to play defense, and he's going to get, the lob threat or a 3-point shot every now and then. Or, freshman Mohamed Diabate, who's just going to play defense, play his role, and as Nate Oates would say, let everything else kind of take care of itself. It's there. If Jalil Bethia wants it, it's there for him to take. but he's got to buy into it.
Yeah, and not to go off track or derail, but we talked about finishing the Missouri game strong and not letting the lead, you know, not let the lead just go away or, lose focus or whatever. Do you think Charles Bediako coming back helps that? Because he was on that Brandon Miller team that was just, I mean, blowing the doors off of, I mean, they would
Yeah.
go up and beat teams by 50 points. Do you think Charles Bediako is a big contributor to that as far as the mentality and not letting up?
I think so, but maybe not necessarily for like being vocal about it, but more for being an anchor on the defense and knowing how to communicate with the defense and knowing how to um knowing how to talk. So yes, being vocal, but being vocal from an actual basketball sense, not necessarily a leadership sense. Um, because if you look when we got leads and got bored, we would have a tendency to slack off on the defensive end, right? And not guard the ball very well, or just, you know, be a little bit, not to say lazy, but be a little more lackadaisical in on that side of the ball. And I think he does help. I think that's a great point that he does help keep everyone locked in simply by being that anchor in the middle and communicating with everyone what their assignment still is and talk defensively. You know,
Yeah.
he played like a pro on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I would just say I feel like Bediako has been a phenomenal teammate, and we knew he's a great guy. Nate Oates talked about before he ever played against Tennessee that he's a great guy. He's a great teammate. I think seeing the success that he has had on the floor in these two games, and seeing the bench or seeing guys on the floor enjoy that success with him. I mean, I think it's very, very easy where guys could have been, you know, upset or not actively show it on the floor. But I think those are genuine emotions that you see from like a Noah Williamson. Got to get a Noah Williamson note in there. But some of the plays Charles Bediako's made, like Noah Williamson's the first guy jumping off the bench. And I actually think it seems to me that Noah plays a little bit more loose those few minutes that he has had on the floor because he's not being counted on. It's kind of taken some of those things off of his shoulders to where he can just go play. Like maybe he feels more comfortable in, I'm going to get 5 to 10 minutes a game. And maybe I may get 15 minutes a game if I come out, and play really, really well or we have foul trouble. But those are some intangibles outside of just the actual basketball play that I think Charles Bediako has brought to this team that could have been up for question before they threw the ball up against Tennessee.
Well, and I think also if you see the way that Nate and Charles interact or Chuck interact on the sideline, like Chuck's going up to Nate and saying, "This is what I'm seeing," oh, this is, oh, and it's not like Nate's coaching him. I'm not trying to make a joke. It's literally like a professional basketball player talking to a coach. Like there's a mutual amount of respect and like they're trying to learn from each other compared to how you see, some of the other guys interact where like Nate's coaching the moment they get off the floor. He's like on them about what they're doing wrong. Where it's with Charles, it's like, oh, this is what we're doing, this is what I see. And then they're making adjustments off of that. And I know a lot of people have a lot of discontent about Charles Bediako playing, and trust me, I get it. I definitely see the side of what people are saying, but he had an NBA contract. He's a former professional basketball player. All of these things, like it makes sense, and I'm not disagreeing. Um, I'll also say that you have guys that are playing. That don't have college eligibility that have these same type of court orders that are allowing them to play. You have guys that played in the G League, same as Charles, but because Charles signed a two-way contract that he never played in the NBA, like that's some big stipulation, red flag, whatever. Um, and you have guys that made more money overseas than what Charles Bediako did in in the G League. And there's no problems that anyone has with all of that. But there's this some grand conspiracy with this judge and all. It's fine. If he can play, he can play. If Nate Oates wants him to play, he will play. You know, under the legal guidelines of whatever is upcoming. But um, the
But
whole internet just crashing out over this is just something that I've never seen before. And not to just make this about Alabama, but like it really feels like, but it's because Alabama's doing this is why a lot of people are upset about it.
Well, I mean, it's probably a good transition into the Florida game.
Yeah.
Todd Golden's one of those guys that is crashing out. Todd Golden's also not a stranger to being in trouble himself, as we all know from last year. He also learned
If
from
please Google Todd Golden legal issues for
yeah.
more information.
He also learned from the best. He was on the Auburn staff with Bruce Pearl once he got there as well. Like Todd Golden knows how to bend rules, and of course, he's another guy who has a former European international on his team
Three.
as
He
well.
has three
Yeah.
former European internationals on his team.
So, look, he's arrogant. Nate Oates is arrogant too. Like they talk their talk and they're able to back it up a lot of times. So it's the comment he made of we're going to beat them anyway. That's going to last up until the ball gets thrown up. That might get talked about a little bit from the team. The teammate obviously is going to be aware of that, but it's not going to have any impact on the game. You're playing on a Sunday afternoon, first SEC Sunday afternoon game. That's not the SEC championship basketball tournament championship game in a long time. I've heard Nate Oates talk about it on the radio as far as this game getting flexed to that Sunday before the season even started, in between, the conference championships and the Super Bowl. And what ABC is trying to do is having a marquee game on Sunday, and there will be a lot of eyeballs on ABC since you've got the former national champion and what's going on with Alabama as well, and what Alabama basketball has been for the past couple years and the style that we play. So it's going to be a high profile game, and we talked about it a little bit on and off, but having the experience and the success that we saw in the game against Missouri, playing the two bigs is very important going into this game. I think it's really important that Amari Allen be able to play in this game. If he doesn't, it's not that all hope's lost. But I expect he and London Jemison and Taylor Bolbowen are guys that are going to be on Thomas Ha, which allows Sherelle Bediako, Noah Williamson to be able to play against Chinny Liu and Han Logden and Condon. And then there is no Walter Clayton Jr. for Florida anymore. As much as of a heater Mark Sears was on for about 2 years, I think Walton Clayton Jr. probably upped him, of course, winning the national championship last year and what he did. The Florida guards have been struggling. Lee and Boogie Flan have not shot well from the outside as a team. Florida is shooting under 30% from the 3-point line. And so when I look at this game, obviously you got to hold your own on the rebounding side. Even in games that we've won, we have not won the rebounding, but you cannot get beat by plus 10, plus 15, plus 20 on the glass. Florida's also been a team that's averaging about 13 turnovers. That's another battle that you should be able to win just because we've done a pretty good job taking care of the ball. And this is a game where as poor as Florida has shot the ball from three this year, you need to be plus 4, plus 5, plus 6 in 3-point makes. And Florida's going to try to run us off the 3-point line because that has been their strategy ever since Todd Golden's there. So it's going to be important to get the good looks that you want, not just get 3-point shots for 3-point sake. But we've also, again, if Amari Allen can play, that brings another guy that can drive to the rim, maybe put some pressure on that Florida defense, put some pressure on Thomas Ha. Obviously, want Aiden Holloway and his wrist to be healthy and be able to play as well. I feel really good going into this game. I agree with Michael, feeling a lot better that we've got the bigs. I will feel great if Amari Allen plays. If he doesn't, like, we will have a plan. We'll figure it out. Hopefully, London Jemison doesn't get 3 quick fouls in the first half. But really, probably the best we have matched up against Florida in the past 2 or 3 years since Todd Golden has gotten there.
I'll definitely I'll feel better about the game if Lee doesn't come out in the number 99 jersey, because that's really the only, that's the only time I've seen someone look as close to Walter Clayton Jr. As far as from a shooting standpoint. But like you said, it's the key to Florida has been, yes, their bigs. Their bigs have been so impressive, and they're athletic, and they're long, and they're good rebounders, and they're physical. But as we saw in the tournament last year, Florida would get behind. Florida got behind in every game except the first round. They got behind early, and they were almost knocked out in the second round by UConn. But Walter Clayton Jr. got hot and carried them to a national championship. Boogie Fland is very talented. All right. Lee is very talented, but they are not the outside shooters that that Walter Clayton was, and they're not going to be able to rise and fire as much. Now, Lee will probably hit a couple threes. He probably will. He's got a nice little step back. We will probably we will probably back off of them a little bit, just because that's what we do, try to play the numbers. We will probably not press on them as much, just because we don't want to get the blow bys and put Bediako or Sherrill in a bad position to give up a lob, right? And so we will probably try to make them beat us, from three. I'll tell you, I really like, and being on Alabama podcast, I don't want to give Auburn credit for anything, but their game plan versus Florida was very good Saturday. Anytime the ball was in the paint, they had three guys collapsing on it, and they were making Florida spray it out to their guards, and they struggled to hit. So, I don't know that we'll be that extreme as Auburn was, but I think there's some merit to having some type of game plan like that, where we make Florida beat us from the outside.
That would be, I know that should be the game plan, and I agree that I think that will be the game plan. Maybe it's just like watching old Alabama basketball games where you play a team that shoots 25% from three, and they go and they shoot 45, 50%, and knowing that Florida's playing at home. So the Florida fans are very familiar with how poorly they've shot a three. In a game like this, when Florida hits 1 3, it's going to feel like they hit three threes basically in one shot. I think just the excitement and the energy that crowd could bring. So it kind of, to me, I feel like it's a little bit of cat and mouse as far as, I agree. You want to play the percentages. You want to, pack the paint, make them take some of those shots they haven't been successful at. But I don't want them to get in a rhythm like we saw, going back to Missouri quickly and being a little bit surprised about that result. Remembering what Missouri did to us last year in Como, and they had a lot of those guys still, and Cruz and Mark Mitchell, that, on that team, and we just took it to them this past Tuesday. Don't want the Florida offense, to hit some early threes because we're trying to play the percentages and get into a rhythm. I would feel better if you get up on them, have some misses, and then start sagging back, because they just don't have that confidence in playing with that energy.
Well, and when I say back off, I don't mean do what we did to North Carolina in the Sweet 16.
You don't mean Sweet 16.
Mean that. I just mean not completely press up on them to give up the blow by, because as good as I feel like overall, I feel like our first shot defense has been pretty good all year. Like our first shot defense. However, I do feel like as of late, our guards have not stayed in front of the ball as well as they should have. So I think there's that aspect of it. And you were talking about the crowd. I think maybe even worse than giving up a three as far as for momentum is, getting those lob dunks from drives just because you're going to really get the crowd energized because that's how Florida plays. I feel like they know they're not going to be where Boogie Flan's going to hit 5 threes. I feel like they know that. And so they're going to keep trying to pound it inside. And so when I say that, I'm not saying, hey, we're going to completely back off and just let them shoot threes. I just mean we're not going to press up on them in risk of getting blown by.
I'm excited to see Bediako against Chinelu because what I remember from the first part of Bediako's career is anytime he went up against Oscar Tshiebwe or Armando Bacot or anybody like that, he typically had a really good game. And not just on the offensive side. He typically held his own getting rebounds against those guys. And Chinny Luke comes in averaging 11 rebounds per game. So I'm really excited to see him go against a guy who's been great on the glass. And if he can neutralize him, that's obviously a huge win in Alabama's category, a huge battle win for Alabama as they try to win the war against Florida.
I also think you were talking a little bit earlier about the impacts of Todd Golden's comments after the game versus Missouri. I mean, Latrell Wrightsell said that they heard the comments and that they said, yeah, I think it's not a direct quote, but he was like, they made the first shot or they took the first shot at us and they were like, oh, and we'll, and that's all we got to say about that. And so I do think that the guys are kind of coming in, and I think it's probably best that it's a road game because the guys are going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to try to prove a point. And then for Todd Golden to come back and double down, today, right? Like he's just adding fuel to the fire. I'm not saying that that's going to be the ultimate deciding factor for the game, but I do think that the guys are going to come locked in, and hopefully they spend enough time, locked in on the scouting report, making sure that everything they're prepping properly. And I really think that Alabama has a good shot here to win the game. But I don't think letting them be open for three is a recipe for success. They did that versus Texas, and Texas just nuked you both in the first half and then in the second with two different guards because you're just leaving guys wide open and they're just draining it, and now they're in rhythm and now you can't beat them. And so it's the same thing with this team every single time we talk about this. Limit a team to one shot. If you can limit a team to one shot per possession, you win the game. Alabama is one of the best defenses in the country in first shot defense and one of the worst after offensive rebounds. So if you can somehow find a way to limit them to one shot, I think Alabama, could potentially win this game pretty easily.
Before we go, you talked about Todd Golden doubling down. Mark Pope has made his comments. I don't necessarily blame them. I mean, the same way that I talked last week, like Nate Oates' responsibility is to the University of Alabama and to the fans to go win a national championship. I mean, Todd Golden is doing the same thing. It may be a little bit of a different route, but as you just mentioned, they've got 3 European players. If we want to talk about breaking rules or being shady, we all know Mark Pope tampered with Mohamed Diabate. I don't even think the Diabate was in the transfer portal for 24 hours.
He did it. No, they tampered with him in December.
Yeah. So look, Mark, you're coaching a roster worth $22 million. You're not meeting expectations. Your best player is basically giving up on the year so he can take care of his draft stock. Like I get the frustration. I get that you don't want to play Alabama with Charles Bediako. There's a reason why Jeff Goodman is saying Alabama is now a national title contender if they can get healthy and Charles Bediako being cleared. I get it. I just think it's ridiculous that these guys are saying that when they're out there breaking these same rules that they're complaining about.
Well, Jay Billis said it, and I think we'd all agree that we trust Jay Billis's opinion on legal matters for sure, and but he said the reason that a lot of these coaches are so outspoken is because they don't want to play against Charles Bediako. So because what is the one weakness we've talked about is rebounding and interior defense. And now Alabama has Aiden Sherrill's fine. Aiden Sherrill's fine. But now you have a second guy that may be a little better on, the defensive end. And so that just adds, adds something to this basketball team. And now it's your interior defense can be a strength.
And because he played at Alabama previously, I think it's easy for people to think that the only team talking to Charles Bediako was Alabama. There were multiple teams across the country that were trying to get Charles Bediako as part of their roster. Multiple teams.
I mean, I can tell you a team. Brian Hodgson was trying to get Charles Bediako on his team. I'm just going to say it right now. They were going through the same process. So, and it's not just Charles Bediako. There's countless coaches across the country that were doing the exact same thing. Alabama's just the first one to do it. You go look at Kentucky, you talk about Mark Pope not saying that, oh, we shouldn't have these professional players, whatever. They're trying to get Dink paid on the roster. He played in the G League. But Charles Bediako is bad because he signed a two-way deal that he never played in the NBA for, right? Like the logic that's what the whole court case is about, right? Like you can't arbitrarily put a line and say you signed an NBA contract, NBA bad, you can't play. Like that doesn't that in a court of law that doesn't make sense. Like so do I don't know. I get why people don't want Charles Bediako to play, and I don't fault anyone. I don't want professional basketball players in college athletics. And I understand why Europeans and international guys go and play, how the international game works, where you have 17-year-old pros and then they come and then they go. That's fine if they're high school age. But now you have guys, and that's what Todd Golden was saying. He's like, oh, our guys are 17 years old, 18 years old. They played pro basketball. They come in and they don't have high school basketball, so that's how they do it. But that's not what's happening. That's a very disingenuous argument. You're having guys that are 21, 22 years old getting 4 years of eligibility after playing 3 years of actual European professional basketball, and they're getting 4 years. And now you're having 25, 26-year-old guys playing in college basketball that have already played against the top level, the second best league of basketball in the world in the Euro League. Like that doesn't make sense to me. And that's what the argument's about. It's not about the 17-year-old guys going and playing and then coming in. It's about the 21, 22-year-old guys that see that they can make more money in the collegiate game than they can in the Euros, and then they come over.
Well, and the high school game has changed so much. I mean, you're not having these guys that are top five in the country playing against guys who are going to be in, fraternity houses or, your future accountant or something like that. They're going to the IMGs, they're going to the Link Academies, they're going to Spire and Mount Verdi and Sunshine and all that, like Prolific Prep. Like they're playing top competition. It may not be top competition that's 24, 25, 26 years old, but let's not pretend that high school basketball like it was back in Hoosiers, where you're just playing kids that grew up in that town.
Well, Amari Allen did, and he came to Alabama and pretty successful. So
Yeah.
I will say that. But I think a lot of people aren't understanding the difference in the two, the like what the two arguments are. Both arguments can coexist at the same time and both be correct. Like, Nate Oates' argument, or maybe not Nate Oates, Charles Bediako's lawyers' arguments are you have guys that are going and playing European professional basketball that are playing against 25, 26-year-old, players and getting better development than what you would typically probably see from a high school level that are allowed to come and play in the collegiate game. But then you have a guy that has arbitrarily signed a contract that never executed the portion that is being deemed ineligible. And I don't even know why they're harping on the NBA thing if you're the NCAA. What you should be focusing on if you're the NCAA is the fact that Charles Bediako declared for the draft foregoed his eligibility or forewent. I learned from Andrew Parrish that forewent is the proper term. Forewent his eligibility and is trying to come back. Like that seems pretty cut and dry for me, but instead they're harping on this whole NBA thing for whatever reason. Um, but on the flip side, sorry, go ahead.
No, just taking that point of not maybe going after the right argument. People are talking about that they want Congress to get involved and give the NCAA this antitrust, whatever. Like, do we really want the NCAA to be in charge? And do we really want politicians to be in charge of helping the NCAA? That feels like one corrupt organization bailing out another corrupt organization. Like, I think we all agree it's broken, it needs to be burned down, and maybe not start from scratch, but getting these two together just feels like you're going to make a toxic situation even more toxic.
Well, and you have people going on Reddit and all of these things that they're now trying to like put in the court of law about a judge, right? And it's just I understand that point, but it's just I don't know. I think all of this has just gone too far down a rabbit hole that like you should just let it play out because all across the country you have these types of situations and there's not been that many issues from people like Trinidad Chambliss, the judge that's doing his case is an Ole Miss alum, and you're not hearing a single word from anyone about it.
Yeah, Tyrion Grant Foster's his court case was a local judge.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what happens in state courts.
yeah,
So,
and that's why the people file it like that. It's an intentional like they're not going to go file it in jurisdiction that's not favorable for them. It doesn't make any sense.
Not Alabama's fault that they have a prestigious law school and Auburn doesn't even have a law school.
Well, and I will say this, people complaining that got people graduated from University of Alabama law. Alabama's law school is like top 30 in the country. Like it's a very good national law school. Like, oh, sorry, someone graduated from a top 30 law school. Whatever should you like whatever. I don't know. It's either that or go to Sanford. So like you choose in the state of Alabama. But um other than that, we have the Florida game. As far as spaces, we were kind of talking beforehand. I don't know how much more spaces we'll end up doing. It's just a lot of the times it's just us talking, truthfully, and not a lot of, you know, what it used to be was a lot of people would come in and interact and talk and stuff. And um, with us doing a lot of the talking, we do the talking on the podcast. So I don't know how beneficial it is to kind of double talk about things. So maybe spaces are more of an occasional thing rather than a consistent thing. Um, but that's kind of my thoughts. I think Michael kind of agreed with me on that. Charles, I know you weren't here for that conversation, but hopefully that's a-okay thing for you.
Probably make me safer driving back from Tuscaloosa after a game.
it just
Yeah.
means everybody can turn on and listen to Chris Stewart and Brian Passing talk in the post game.
Yes, yes. Which I have to talk to Chris about, Chris and Brian about getting on podcasts, so I have to do that. But other than that, we'll have a podcast that won't be this late, coming out next week. With the weather and my work, it's been kind of hectic on this side, but won't be as late next week, and we'll be covering the A&M and the Auburn game. So other than that, we will talk again soon. Charles, am I missing anything?
I think we need to plug the interview with Rob Vaughn. People need to
Oh
go check that
yeah.
out from the Weekly Joe.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I completely forgot about that. I forgot to do all the plugs. Well, one, we'll get plug blue collar podcast. I almost said blue collar unplugged. Um, if you know, you know. But blue collar podcast with Emily Smar and Michael Southern. I assume that they'll have a Florida podcast coming out here soon. Tide Machine's going to be doing some stuff in the off season. We'll have, Tide Hoops history. Michael's doing some great stuff with that. And then Weekly Joe is back. We released the episode yesterday. with Rob Vaughn. It's about an hour and a half. They talk about all the offseason stuff that, building the roster, kind of what the implications and their thoughts on this team were and all of this. It's an hour and a half long. It's a great episode if you're a big fan of baseball, or even if you're not a big fan of baseball, just be able to get the head coach of the baseball team on and, talk about those things is a pretty big deal. So definitely go check that out. Um,
That was it.
other that was it. Also, like and subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow now viral sensation Charles Branch on Twitter. Uh, he's getting posted on Facebook now, so against his will. But
And it wasn't an AI generated article.
other than
I
that,
came up with it myself. Look at me.
yeah, yeah. Other than that, we'll have a podcast out next week. Maybe do a space, just depends on how we all feel. But we'll talk again soon and roll tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.